Check. 1, 2, 3.
The D.
Brief.
This is the D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's arts
and entertainment scene.
This is the D
Brief.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your co-host. My name is Seth Ressler. My other co-host isn't here today. Well, actually, I'm not with her today. Normally, we put out a interview podcast, but I am at Podcast Movement, which is the world's largest podcasting conference in Orlando. But don't worry, we still have some Detroit representation. I'm excited that we have the president of Motor City Woman, Robin Kinnie, who's presenting here a couple times at Podcast Movement. So
thanks for having me, Seth.
We have thank you for joining me. We've got a nice Detroit representation here this year.
I think so.
Right? We
had
the guys from WDIV who did Shattered podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We the Believed podcast.
Believed out of Ann Arbor.
Yep, that Michigan Radio does.
Mm-hmm.
But that's true in general. That Detroit has a really exciting podcast scene going on right now.
I believe so. I mean, from looking at the past few years, looking at, different events like most recently, the Detroit Podcast Festival, which is in its second year. This was the second year for the festival, and seeing the numbers grow from last year. Last year it was just in one room, and this year was at multiple sites across the city. The work that Joy and Aaron are doing to grow not only the podcast festival, but also grow the reach of podcasters, so other people know that, hey, we have a community right here in Detroit that's doing some pretty cool things.
Well, let's talk about what you guys are doing over at Motor City Woman, because you're not only doing podcasts, you're doing internet radio as well. Talk a little bit about the mission and the vision of Motor City Woman.
Well, we started actually as a digital radio station back in 2015. And even further back, I had a radio show on Radio 1, just called the Motor City Woman Radio Show. And the reason that I had a radio show was because I just recognized the lack of women in broadcasting. In a lot of cases, the woman was a comic relief. She was brought in for a very specific reason, and she was rarely part of just the daily conversations that may or may not have to do with something that's related to being a woman. And so we launched the Motor City Woman radio show and loved it, interviewed a lot of women across the Metro Detroit area. We talked about everything from health and wellness to entrepreneurship. But a few months into it, I just realized that there was more than one voice that needed to be heard, and that I wasn't the only person that was going to represent Motor City Woman. And so that in turn launched the Motor City Woman Radio Network, which is, as you mentioned, a digital radio station that's still in operation. It is the state of Michigan's only all-women-led lineup of show hosts for the digital radio station. We stream 24/7. We have a variety of shows. Again, all different subject areas, topics. And in addition to that, we really try to promote women musicians. So in between the shows, you're listening to local artists, you're listening to mainstream artists, and 99% of our playlists are women.
Oh, that's awesome. I come from radio. I work in radio.
Right.
I still consult radio stations, and you're right. I mean, I'm from rock radio where, typically it's been the morning show's two guys and a woman, and the woman has been relegated to middays. And I think that's a conversation that's been happening in the industry. Oddly enough, in radio, women are doing better at the executive level than they actually are in front of the mic. Right? And so that's been really interesting to watch. So I think that's really important. I go to a lot of radio conferences, and we're here at Podcast Movement. This is different, in large part because of the number of voices and the diversity that you see in the attendance here. This is your first time. What do you take away from it?
This is my first time. I've never seen a conference that's as supportive. It seems like everyone wants everyone else to win. I don't see a lot of competition. It's like everyone is just so open, and they're asking, oh, what's your podcast? How can we help you? Walking through the Expo and looking at all the different vendors that are there to help you grow your podcast.
Yeah.
It's a very welcoming community I've seen.
I like that about podcasters in general.
Podcasters
are
I think we have
nice
a personality trait.
We do.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and us Detroit podcasters, like you said, we get together now and then, and, we like hanging out out with each other?
Yeah,
Because
the brunch that that you hosted was phenomenal. That's where I was able to meet Shannon Kaysen. I never
Yep.
met Shannon before.
who's a storyteller, who
Who's a
does a lot of the
storyteller.
moth and stuff like that. Yeah.
So just reaching out and seeing that, hey, there's other people who are not only interested in what I'm interested in, but are doing great work.
Yep.
And how can we support one another so that we can all grow together?
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about some of the specific shows that you've got, or some of the hosts that you've got over there at Motor City Woman.
Right now, on both the podcast side and the digital radio side is very different. One of our podcasters is Ann Doyle. Ann Doyle is a veteran broadcaster. She actually, fun fact, was one of the first women to be allowed in a sports locker room to do a post-game interview.
Oh, really?
Yes. And her podcast is called Powering Up with Ann Doyle, and she has her niece Monica Doyle with her, and it's a multi-generational conversation about all sorts of topics. Just recently, they did an episode about Comic Con. So a lot of people know about Comic Con.
There's something else? What is
yes,
Comic Con?
That's something actually totally different. I didn't even know. So Comic Con, and comic book, not only comic book dealers, but comic book writers, illustrators, predominantly male industry. Comic Con is for women, illustrators, writers, comic book dealers, and they recently hosted Comic Con in Dearborn. And so Ann went and she interviewed some of the vendors there, and they were talking about why they created a comic book series, from a female lens. And that's what her podcast is all about, is taking these very male-dominated either industries or conversation and looking at it from a different point of view.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Very interesting. Another podcast that we've been working with for, it's been almost a year now, is called Mother Honestly. And Mother Honestly is it could be for a mom who's a stay-at-home mom, maybe you work out of the home, but the mom that's looking for that unattainable balance, because as a mom of 3, there's just no such thing. You just have to pick your battles. But what I love about their podcast is that it's all about putting together or connecting their audience with resources, other mothers, and kind of teaching them and sharing with them how they were able to figure it all out. They do an annual summit called Mother the Summit, actually this October, where they'll have all the people and some of the people that they've interviewed on the podcast to actually present and, kind of share where they are and how they're able to lead an organization, be CEO of a company or something to that effect, while being a, quote, good mother. And what does that even mean, being a good mother? So it's a lot of different layers to it. And, like in the session today, what I love about podcasting is that you can do such a deep dive.
Right.
It's not just, okay, I have this amount of time to do it. If you had a podcast that was 2 hours long, and I've listened to a 2-hour long podcast, you can really go deeper into a story and, really engage with your listeners.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So, very cool. Well, look, I know you have another session to get to. You're in high demand here at Podcast Movement.
I'm so excited.
So I don't want to hold you up because there's 3,000 people in this place. It's a big place, and it takes a while to get from place to place. But if people want to check out what you guys are doing over there at Motor City Woman, well, where can they find, either the radio shows or the podcast shows?
The best place is to go to our website, and that's just simply motorcitywoman.com. We also have our partner company, audioengineersofdetroit.com, and that focuses on, increasing the number of women in audio engineering and launching our audio engineering training school this fall. And then, of course, on all social media platforms at Motor City Woman.
So let me ask about that quickly.
Sure.
If there's a woman out there who's listening, or even parents of who have a daughter who is interested in audio engineering, what should they do?
First step is to go to the website, audioengineersofdetroit.com. There is like an interest form on there, so you can sign up on that interest form, and then when we're ready to start accepting applications, you will get an email from us.
Awesome. That's cool. Well, Rob and Kinnie, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you
the time.
so much for having me, Seth.
The D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.